So, with no further ado, we have our exciting program tonight will be on headshots and editorial photography. The bona fides of our presenters are so substantial that I wouldn't even dare try to describe these people to you. I will let them do that for you. We have our own very own Nima, who is a board member and a long-standing involvee at CPS, if that's a word. And we have, where did Johnny go? Oh, okay. And Johnny hiding in the middle on the side. Johnny Knight, who happens to be my studio mate. I'm very proud of that. I met Johnny when he was teaching an advanced portraiture class at Richard Stromberg's school, which I was taking. I was actually teaching Digital 1 and then taking this advanced class. And so every week for like 6 weeks or 8 weeks, whatever the class was, I went to Johnny's studio and sat there and looked around and thought, oh my God, like life could be so great if I had a studio like this. So at the end of the class, after the 8 weeks, I went to Johnny and I said, how did you find this great place? Like, I want to find a place like this. And he said, oh, well, the person I'm sharing with is leaving. You want to come in? Like, talk about Kismet. So that's how I met Johnny, and it's been, 3 years now we've been sharing a studio? So, yeah. Okay, and he's a fabulous photographer. It's just really, really good and kind of intimidatingly good, as a matter of fact, as Nima is as well. So I'm actually really excited to hear what they both have to say tonight. So, Nima, you're going first?
Sure.
Okay, so give it
this to this, or maybe this, and to do photography as my main source of income. And the question was how I'm going to do this. And so I went and thought about, there were several options. One was, I had background in fine art photography. I used to, before going to law school, I was in Los Angeles, and I did have a gallery, a cooperative gallery. So I had some familiarity with fine art photography and selling. So that was one option. The other one was to do headshots and for actors and talents, and that was something that also, I had a lot of friends back in the day when I was in Los Angeles. They did headshots, and they did very lucrative income, and they did very well. And that was another option that I could consider. The third option was to shoot models, do fashion photography and models, and do models portfolios, which was interesting. And then the last option was commercial work, doing work for magazines or art, advertising agencies and such, commercial work. So I started with fine art photography. What I did was I started a gallery called Margin Art Gallery. It was a cooperative art gallery that we started with 12 artists in Chicago. And we had a run for 4 years. We had shows off and on. We had some really big shows, and it was really good. And some of the work that I did was, this was a part of a series called Sources, where the idea was that whether you are in the process of being born or in the process of dying, you always go through this light. And that was the idea of that show, and that was one of many shows that we did. I did some nudes, I did some different work. And that was interesting, and I had a lot of fun doing it. And the thing that the ideas was to go, work with galleries, work with collectors, doing art fairs. And the galleries was interesting because galleries are hard to get into. The people who own galleries, they're what I call bureaucrats. They want to sell. So they're not really necessarily looking for what a good art is what sells, and because that's how they make their money. So there are a lot of limitations. Same thing with collectors. You have to know who they are. You have to be able to find them. You have to be able to communicate with them. You have to know what they want, and people, there are a lot of go-betweens from good collectors. So you have to get into knowing them. Art fairs are interesting. I did a couple of art fairs. I did one art fair in the Merchandise Mart. And those are expensive. You go there, you put your work, and you sit there for 3 days, and hopefully, somebody will buy. The thing was that it was a lot of work for not much return. All of those, at least my experience was. And so the question was, the competition obviously is enormous. The question was whether that's what I want to continue doing. And I decided, well, let me try my other option, which was the headshots. And I started doing headshots for talents. And this guy is he's a character actor. Just did actors, kids, studio work. What I did was I turned the attic of my house in Evanston. I turned it into a little studio, and all these were done there. People would come in. I started a website. I called it All American Headshots, and the reason why I call it All American Headshots is that some of the places where I would advertise, they would list the names alphabetically. So I figured, I want to be right on top. If you're on the T, they would be way down there. Nobody's going to get you. So I created an All American Headshots photography. The URL had photography in there, and had my website, my blogging, and actually, I think up to recently, All American Headshots is organically way up on Google if you do Chicago headshots photography. And did this. My target market was obviously the actors, the talents, for voiceover and jugglers or what have you. Acting studios where there are a lot of sources for getting jobs. Acting agents, they are great to, there are lists of acting agents you can contact. Again, all these are, schools. What I found with headshot photography was that the competition was enormous, and my photography I felt that didn't stand. It was good, but it wasn't the best. And I was looking at some of the work Johnny does, and he's way ahead of me in those, and there was no way I could compete with people like Johnny. So I figured, that's not what I want to do. The other thing that I didn't want to do is work with individuals. I don't have much of a patience to haggle over money. And I want to get paid when I do a job, and I want to get paid on time. I don't want to have to keep calling them. I don't have to, running after people wanting to pay me. And individuals do that. You get paid, and then they come back, and I've heard a lot of stories from people who do weddings. The nightmare people who come in. They get paid, and then they don't like the photos. They want to reshoot. The last job that I did in headshots photography was I shot this guy. He wanted some headshots for his LinkedIn. He owned a magazine, a local magazine for music magazine, and he wanted his headshots done for his LinkedIn. And I went to his location. I went to his home. I photographed him. Throughout the shoot, I showed him what he wanted. We discussed what he wanted. We changed. He knew exactly what I was shooting, where I was shooting. He saw everything. Then I went home. We sent him all the proofs. He looked at the proofs. He chose 2 shots as per the package that he had purchased. He chose the 2 that he wanted. I edited them, the right size. I sent it to him. And he had already paid. A week later, he called me and he said that he didn't like the photos. It wasn't what he was looking for. He wanted a different background, and in fact, he wanted a reshoot. So I told him, I said, look, I'm not going to reshoot because there's no way I know, even if I reshoot you, I don't know whether you're going to like the ones that I did, because when I was shooting you, you love everything I showed you. So, and what I did was I refunded his money. I told him to delete all the photographs that I gave you and go find yourself another photograph. I just didn't want to deal with him. And so individuals, I don't have patience for that. And I'm really, I hear some stories, Gokhan talks about, and how patient he is, and that's awesome. I don't have that. So I figured, that's not for me, and that was the last headshots work that I did. Then, there was the model portfolio, and I decided to do model shots. What I did was I signed up with a website called Model Mayhem. And Model Mayhem was very interesting. I did all these models. Again, these are all in the studio in my house, in the attic, and around the house itself. The light is a bit too much. There's more detail in the highlights than what you're seeing. And I did a lot of portfolios for models. Did a shoot, again, with beauty shots, soft boxes, and various photography. The models were interesting, and I will get to. My target market was obviously the models, were makeup artists, hairstylists, designers, actors, some of them. The model mayhem, I have heard different stories. There are some people who don't like to go model mayhem because there's a lot of nonsense that goes on there. But if for models, makeup artists, hairstylists, designers, is one place where you can find all these people. And you have to be very selective, and you have to be very patient in that respect to find and work with it. What I found about this, the model shoot, was that the majority ended up to be on time-for basis. That is, in exchange for photography, they would do the makeup artist. In exchange for photography, they would do the modeling. In exchange for photography, they would do hairstylists. There was not much money involved. And it was up to the photographer, me, to make everything happen. The makeup artists, they would have some ideas. The hairstylist would have some ideas. Designer would have some ideas. Everybody has some ideas, but nobody would actually take any steps towards the idea unless I, the photographer, would do it. So it was all the work was on me. And on the TF shoots, on time for, you have to expect about 60 to 70% no-shows. One of the time that I remember was I was going to shoot this hat designer. So he came to my house with all her hats, a whole bunch of hats. I had the makeup artist there, the hairstylists were there, and we were there waiting for the model who never showed up. So you have to kind of double book or triple book and look into this. So, but there's a lot of no-show. There's a lot of flex on model mayhem that you have to deal with. You have to know, and you kind of start noticing and figuring out who they are by if they don't respond right away, if they don't they say something and then they disappear. You kind of figure out who they are. But 60-70% no-shows, that's pretty much. And as I said, photographer does all the work. The best thing about it was that's how I started my portfolio back up. When I went back into photography about 4.5 years ago, all my work was dated. I hadn't done photography for almost 20 years. So I had to start building my portfolio again. And the entire portfolio that I built was from Model Mayhem. So in that respect, it was great because there was tons of people, and I pretty much, because they were my shoot, I could do whatever I want, and that was a great way to build my portfolio. But there's not much money to be made. One thing that is important about model shoots is that you have to have your model release, you have to have one ready, and you have to get it signed. You don't shoot or don't give out any proofs or any photographs until that model release is signed. It's your shoot. If I set it up, if my ideas, my editing, my photographs, if nobody's paying me, the photographs is mine, and I wanted to own it 100% to do whatever I want with it. If anyone, whether it was a makeup artist, model, stylist, if anyone didn't want to sign my release, I would just not shoot. That was the end of it. Everybody that I worked with always signed the release, and what I did was then in writing I would give them license to use the photograph in their portfolio, in their business card, in their website if they wanted to, and only the photographs that I would give them. I wouldn't give them all the proofs. I would go through the proof myself, choose the photographs that I was going to use, and those were the photographs that I would give out. I would make just one exception for makeup artists, because they have a different requirement that photographers and models do. They want to have close-up of the makeup. And if I had close-up of the makeup, I would let the makeup artists have those in addition to what I would give them. That was the only exception I would make. So the question still after this was how to go where I wanted to go. And so what I always wanted to do was to work with doing editorial work for magazine, and doing portrait photography. Portrait was always my main way of doing work. I mean, that's what I wanted to always do. And editorial environmental work was with, I was able to do it with magazine. That was my goal, to get into magazine, get published. And so I continued with my model work, but I started doing more editorial-like work that would, what I would tell the models is that imagine you're a famous person and there's an article that is being written about you. These are the photographs that is going to accompany that article. And that's how I approached the photographs that we decided to do, the poses, the styling, and all that. And I continued again with Model Mayhem and built my portfolio of portrait work to a certain degree. And what I then did was I started looking around to who is going to be people that I want to approach. One of the things that came to my mind was that, you know, some of these models, they look like models, and this looks like a model shoot. And so I wanted to kind of transition from model shoot to more regular shoot, because if I'm shooting people for, let's say, a magazine, an editorial shoot, the person that I'm going to shoot doesn't look like a model. They look like a regular person, or the musicians, they look like musicians. So I started to look around, and all the artists, people that I knew, I started shooting them. You know, this guy is a artist with his brother Icy and Sat. They're stencil artists. So I shot them as if I was doing a feature for a magazine. She's an entrepreneur. That's my one and only Photoshop montage with the world that I did. She's actually on one of these gym balls that you sit on or work with. I changed that into a world because she's an entrepreneur. He's an architect. I went to Lexington, Kentucky to photograph this architect who's doing some great work in Kentucky. She's a teacher. You know, I know her. She decided to pose for me. This guy is a lawyer. I shot him in downtown. He's a veteran. For myself, I'm trying to do some more work like this of people who more feature stories about people and along that will go along with the story. And I'm working on shooting his friends. You know, Michael Langford, he's a musician. Everybody that actually this guy, he's a local musician. He's been a musician for years. I friended him on Facebook, and I just sent him a message saying, hey, how about if you let me photograph you? A couple hours later, he responded, tell me when and where. I said, okay. So we talked, and he agreed to pose for me, and I shot him. This guy is a cartoonist, but the shift was, as you can see, more into regular people with what they're doing, photography, rather than just modeling and posing. She's an artist. She's really an economist, but she also does art as one of the major things that she does. Then came this shoot. That was my first kind of break. She's a teacher at School of the Art Institute, and she wanted some photographs for a brochure that they were, or a flyer that the School of Art Institute was doing for her, for the class that she was going to teach. So I went to her studio, and I was looking around, and she had this hose, and I said, okay, well, just spur of the moment, let's put you in it. And I shot her with the hose. And the art director at the School of Art Institute, they liked that photo, and that's the one that they use. At the same time, I also started doing some work for Cranes magazine. And, well, before I did some Cranes magazine, I did some work for a magazine in Colorado. And they sent me to shoot this woman who's a financial analyst. She has some huge, ungodly number of money amount of money that she manages. And the feature was about the older businesswomen who are still in business and doing very good. And that was my first cover shot for this magazine. One thing that I learned about this, that the cover shot and the money that the magazine paid me to shoot her, that was just one aspect. The other aspect that I had no idea that was going to come after that was, I got an email about 2 weeks after this came out with this outfit that they specialize in reprints. And they wanted me to give them a quote for 10,000 reprints, for advertising, and some other criteria. And I had no idea how to price that. That was the first time I've ever heard of it. I had become a member of ASMP. And Ron, who at the time was the president, I sent him an email and said, and copy and pasted this request. I told him, look, I have no idea what these people are talking about. I have no idea how to price it. Help me out. Next day, he sent me this email with, he has a program that does that, with screenshots of various options. It was a huge email. I mean, there was like, the options were enormous. There was whether or not, how many reprints, whether it's going to be for advertising, whether any of them going to be on the front page, what size they're going to be, how far and how wide this. It was a huge. It was not just okay, give me this much money and you can use it. It was a lot of different choices. So that's one thing I learned, which I had no idea before, and then I used his suggestions, and I got back with the reprint, and they did reprint, and the reprint is still on, and that's about 6 months after the fact. Concurrently, I also started doing work for Cranes, and I'll get into how I got Cranes. They were doing a feature for a local beauty schools. There's evidently in Chicago, I had no idea, there's a lot of beauty schools that are popping up, and they were doing a feature on those. And she's one of the graduates that they wanted me to shoot as their star graduate. And that was the photograph that they used in the magazine when it came out. I started, did more work for Cranes. I shot this, he's the CEO of Centro, again, he's a local Chicago business leader who they do an ungodly amount of money that he's raised when he did this business that he's in. And did a couple of shots, and that's the one that they used in Cranes. This guy is the chief medical officer of Advocate. The only place, which is, again, is really weird, the only place in Advocate headquarters, which is a huge office, there's a maze of offices, and they have many square footage of office. The only place where they have a big enough logo is by the elevators. They have no logos anywhere, and the editor that I was working with wanted to have the logo in there. But the only place I could find was by the elevator, and the only Photoshop that I did on this was that I took out, can I have the, oops, no. There's the buttons for the elevators here. So I took out the buttons for the elevators because at least it makes it less elevatory and nicer. So that's the only Photoshop I did on this. Did a couple of different shots. They end up choosing this one, which was not my favorite, but that's the one that they end up shooting. Some of the requests that I've received, like this one, I think, the editor called me and he said that he wants to shoot the crowd. They were doing a feature on a local hotel that was expanding, and the question was whether or not there's enough business travel in Chicago that can handle the additional available rooms, and whether it's going to affect the prices. And the editor told me that he wants to shoot the crowd. So I went there. I went in this hotel down in Southside Chicago, and spent there for about 3 hours just shooting people, just without flash. Wanted to give the idea of crowds moving around. Two of them that that I like that they chose, and then they end up using this one in the future. And then there are some others that I shot. The things that I found important while doing this, is marketing, and that I would not have been able to do this work without marketing. So marketing is, that's what, if you don't do any marketing and on a consistent basis, do something else, because that's probably 60% of your work, 60, maybe 80% of your work is when you're doing the marketing and trying to sell your work. You have to be persistent, and you have to be systematic. The way I got Cranes, work for Cranes, is that I went after them for about a year. And the year consisted of 6 emails along with my 6 different emails, 6 different photographs with my website, logo, URL, and introducing myself to the photo editor. 6 postcards that each set would correspond to, the first set of email would go out. I would then set the next postcard which would have the same photograph as the email, and I did that 6 different times. And then there would be a phone call to the photo editor trying to get a meeting, till finally after a year of doing this, then he had decided to meet with me, and I went meet with him, and the design director and one other person showed my work and then decided to give me their work. But it was persistent, it was systematic, it was all the time. Now, my best is, I didn't do that myself. I hired a marketing company to do that for me. The marketing company who did that for me had, as part of the contract, had a program of marketing which consisted of me working with a photo editor. Their photo editor went over all my photographs, the portrait photographs. There were about 800 of them. And she chose about 20 that were my best work, and that was going to be on my website. She helped me in my branding. She looked at all the website, my Facebook, the LinkedIn, the other website that I used, and she told me that they all have to be the same. So we came up with Nima photography, nothing fancy, nothing weird. We designed the logo based on that. We designed the website based on what we wanted to do. We created a PDF portfolio. If you don't have one, you need to have one. Most places where you can go meet, they're going to ask you for a PDF portfolio. And the PDF portfolio is different than your website, because the website they have to go online, they have to put the URL in, and then pictures come in. PDF is self-contained, and that's the portfolio you email to people. So you have to have a PDF portfolio which mirrors your website, but it's a different entity. And obviously, when you get a meeting, you have to be able to show your work. You have to have some way of showing your work. I put it on my iPad. There's a whole bunch of different apps that you can buy. The free ones are okay, but they're not as powerful. The one that I bought was just called Portfolio. It's like $14, and it works with Dropbox. And you can change photos, you can change aspects of it. It's really, really work. But there's a whole bunch. You can just Google it and you can choose one. But portfolio, business cards, and obviously leave behinds. When you have your meeting with the editor, you show your work, you show your iPad, your portfolio, however, you impress them, and you give them your business card. Then you want to leave something behind, which is usually half of 8 by 10, with your 3 or 4 best photograph, your logo, your phone number, so they can tag it, in their message board, and they have it handy if they need to do it. Business card maybe somewhere else that doesn't show, but leave behind is bigger, is more visible. And then you decide who you want, who your target market is. I wanted to do editorial portrait work, so I was looking for all the lists of all the magazines in New York, in Chicago, in Los Angeles, places that I'd like to go, and magazines that use a lot of portraiture. So that also included in the industry magazines, the Advocate or American Express. They put out every year or every 6 months. They put some magazine that goes to their affiliates, to their own business. That also is a great source. So you have to find out who you want to reach, and then get the list and do your marketing presentation. Emails. The program that I had with this marketing company, in the 15-month period of contract, I would be able to send 36,000 emails in 6 different sets. So 36,000 emails. After the first 6,000 goes out, then the postcard goes to the select few that would click on the email. They would give me the rundown as to who clicked, how many times they clicked on it, where did they go. So then I would choose whether or not I want to send a postcard to this person. Then they would get the postcard which mirrored the email, and the marketing people then would call some of these people that, again, based on who I would want to reach, and try, if they were local, try to get me to meet with them. Or if they were in New York or Los Angeles, they would try to get me to see my portfolio, go to my website, get my PDF, and they would send me an email. We talked to this person, they want to see your PDF portfolio, send it. Then I would send. They would approach it as my assistant. They would call, I'm so-and-so, I'm Nima Taraji Photography, I'm an assistant at Nima Taraji. We want to talk about it, we want to sell our services, and that would the cold call be. All these things that I would never would have done. I would be familiar, thank you. I always knew that you have to do these things, but I would maybe do one set of postcards and then I would forget about it 6 months later. The good thing about hiring these people was that they forced me to be persistent, consistent, and systematic. Things that I would have never done. I would never cold call people. I would not know what to tell these people. I'm a photographer. I'm not a salesperson. I'm the same way that I had somebody design my logo. I'm not a designer. Somebody designed my logo for the same reason. I have somebody else to make my calls because I'm not a salesperson. And the money that I spent on the marketing company, it almost paid for itself the first year that they did, so I renewed another 15 months with them, and we're going. And then you go to the meeting. You make sure that you have your portfolio, you have your business card, you have your leave behinds, and show your best work. Doesn't have to be everything in your website. It can also be some of your personal work that you do, some of your personal projects. What I've learned is that the art directors, photo editors, they're photographers, but they're doing something that is other than photography, and they love photography and they like to talk about it. The last meeting that I had with ABA Journal, I had a meeting with them a couple of weeks ago, which they really like my work, and hopefully that will translate into work. The guy started asking me about what I used, about Open Flash. We were looking at some photography that I did with Occupy Chicago, and I used black and white, photojournalistic, with slow shutter speed and a flash, which we call Open Flash, where you have the movement, but then there is a discernible silhouette of a person. I did a lot of that, and they really like it, and we just talked about that rather than anything else. And so personal work is really good to have when it doesn't have to be only the work you do, the professional work. The personal work kind of makes you as a human being, as a photographer, as a fellow photographer to photographer, a conversation which I thought was good. So the marketing has to be done. There's just no choice. That's if there's one thing you take away tonight from this presentation is that you need to sit down and come up with your marketing plan, and it has to be a year, 15-month, 18-month, 2-year, whatever, but a consistent, and put a budget aside and do it. Figure out what it is that is to be done, and then stick to it. When I started the All-American Headshots, I didn't want to pay Google for the SEO. I did some of it, but quickly it becomes very expensive. So the question was how I'm going to be on the first page if I don't want to pay Google to be on top. I have to be there organically. So it took me about a year to get on the first page. I learned about how the SEO work, the blogging, your keywords, the URL, and the amount of the blog you do, the words that you use in your blog, all that. But it took me about a year to get there. But it has to be consistent. I didn't just do it a couple of weeks and say, oh, it's not working, let me try something else. You have to stick with it, and obviously it has to be something that you research and you look into before you start doing it for a year. But after you've done all your research, after you've done all the initial decision, then stick to it and do it. But you have to do it. There's just no choice. And so, marketing, and so that's the end. Thank you. Now, Johnny.
Where's the clicker? Here we go. Hey, that's my logo. I'm actually really glad that I get a chance to go after Nima. Not only, actually, I probably am going to just die in the water, but Nima brought up a lot of points that I think it's great. And so if you want, we can sort of consider this a point-counterpoint between Nima and me. It's quite possible, though, that he and I will agree on a great many things, too, so I don't know that much that there will be a lot of controversy, or this is not going to be crossfire, but it's at least going to be something entertaining where we can say, I can say, he said that, so I say this. So real quick, just to give myself a little bit of credibility here. My name is Johnny Knight, and I am a Chicago headshot photographer. I am I've been doing headshot photography since 2001. I think I officially became a professional in 2001. I was one of the few people who voluntarily quit my day job right after September 11th, 2001, which was really a mistake. And I can attest, and I am a prime, the whole thing of Nima saying that marketing must be done, I really did not realize just how true that was until around 2008. Which meant that I went through, I went through a lot of near misses and a lot of near, going under, and had to be, I worked on a very bargain basement kind of basis, and was just barely making ends meet until around, really till about 2010. Because in 2008 was when it's all sort of, the economy just died, and I realized, and also I had a kid in 2008, and I bought a house in 2009, so my expenses went way up and my income was going way down. So what ended up happening was I realized, I need to redo my website. I need to get all the pictures that I've taken over the past 8 years, I need to put those up there and start to show people that this is what I can do. Because until then I had relied pretty much exclusively, I mean, I had a website, but I was not very good at maintaining it. It was not very user-friendly. And I basically was relying on the kindness of strangers or kindness of friends to refer me. And so almost all of my clients were directly or indirectly, friends of mine, friends or friends of friends. So what I found that doing headshots, and I got into this particular line of work, I'll go ahead and show you so you don't just have me to look at. Doing actors' headshots, which is what I really got into this to do, I fell into this particular niche of photography because I was an actor myself before I became a photographer. So I know that immediately it undermines a lot of my credibility for a lot of you. The fact that I was a film student before that, and I actually have a degree in film production from the University of North Carolina, hopefully raises the bar back up a little bit. So I came to Chicago to be an actor and filmmaker. both of which I did very briefly. The acting I was more successful at than the filmmaking, just mostly because filmmaking is incredibly tedious and incredibly expensive. Although, now that digital photography is in, I probably could get back into it more easily than I thought. But anyway, I'm storytelling. I'm a storyteller through and through, beginning to end. Everything that I do in one way or another comes back to story. And I love theater, and I love comedy. I love performers of any kind, storytellers of any kind who can hold my attention, always are just near and dear to my heart, and they just captivate me. So everything that I do as a photographer comes back to story, which is one of the reasons I love Nima's editorial work, and which is one of the reasons why I really am not a huge fan of doing model portfolio type work myself. When you deal with a context of some kind, when you deal with a story where you can really kind of sink your teeth into it and figure out the details and the before and after, and you see the picture and the picture suggests something that's maybe coming or something that just happened. I really got into doing theatrical production photography, which of course, that and actors' headshots have been my bread and butter ever since 2001 because I knew so many people in that world. And those are the people who have bailed me out time and again when my marketing efforts were getting low. So this guy is a friend of mine named Dave Skvarla, and I knew him as an actor. I had gone to see him in play productions many a time before we had actually met. He also does market research, and he would every now and then call my wife to go into do like an hour-long research study for $50 where they ask you to look at a toothpaste ad, and that's his day job. And he's an incredibly successful actor, but as a stage actor, you can't really make any money. You can't make a living exclusively as a stage actor. And exclusively as a performing arts photographer, you really can't make enough money to make a living either. So if any of you are thinking about getting into just doing actors' headshots, I can tell you that it needs to be a chunk of the puzzle, but it really can't be the entire thing. Am I talking too loud, too fast? Everybody hear me okay? Okay. So what ended up happening was I had seen this guy in so many plays, and he had seen my work taking headshots for a lot of his friends. And so a good 6 or 7 years after each of us knew who the other one was quite well, he finally called me up and said, hey, I need you to take a headshot for me. So the world that, is this helping or not? Is it okay? Back up? Is it better? Better? No? This is the thing it's talking to, right? Okay. So basically, the word of mouth of 6 or 7 years, and each of us knowing the other's reputation, finally resulted in him calling me up and saying, hey, I want you to take a headshot for me. And of course, there was oh yeah, I know you, yeah, of course, I'd be happy to. And so we finally did. And so it ended up being in essence, I got to know him well before I actually met him, and he knew my work well before he actually met me. And so we had a story to tell, even though we hadn't really even intentionally collaborated on it, even before we met. And so once just talking to him, I almost kind of felt like I knew him, which is great when you work in a small world like the world of theater, because you can get to know people and you can get to do stuff like this. And since acting, or since leaving acting, I do all kinds of headshots. I do business headshots for a lot of small businesses. I do all the physician headshots for a group called DePage Medical Group. So I've taken over 400 pictures, 400 physicians for them. They're all up on their website, and I can show you actually. My work, I like to think, is not necessarily a work in any particular kind of genre. Rather, each shot suits the subject, and each shot is in some way about the subject's story. And that's ultimately what I really try for. And I'm so story-driven, I'm so once I get an idea in my head, I kind of want to plow through with it. And sometimes I go a little too far and overthink things and everything. Sometimes it takes a shot like this, 8 years in the making, and then we finally get together, and I feel like I've captured the perfect essence of him in this picture. And so it takes a lot of work, a lot of effort, and a lot of collaboration, intentional and unintentional, to make a picture look effortless. And I'm not saying that I have an 8-year relationship, indirect relationship with every one of my clients, but I do really try to figure out what each client is about. And whether they're an actor or whether they are, a musician, a magician. I actually, for some reason, I seem to have fallen into the niche of shooting magicians, which is fantastic. I absolutely, I mean, you talk about somebody like the two media that really go hand in hand, magician and photographer, it's such a synergy. My work does not particularly complement models. Because models are sort of waiting to be told the story that they have to tell too. And what I like is to get somebody who's got an established persona and kind of figure out how to help them express that persona and try to catch that. So that's really where my work kind of comes in. Although I do model shoots all the time, but I still kind of approach it from a point of view of character and persona and story as much as I can, as much as they'll let me. So I'll just show you a few of the acting headshots that have worked for me. This is a good example of what I would consider a commercial headshot, in that she has a knockout smile, and it just immediately commands the picture. Like everybody who sees this picture says, "Oh, that's so her. That's perfect," because she's just a really, really smiley person. And then you look at this is another picture that I really like a lot, but I'm very proud of a person who is much more serious, of a person who is much more But she's a stage actor. Her name's Carmen Roman, and she's just a veteran of the Chicago stage. And she's played, Medea and all these just sort of hyper serious, focused, intense roles. And so I hope, honestly, I like to hope that the pictures that I take that best capture each person, when that person dies, and we go to the Jeff Awards or the Oscars or whatever, when they're doing the in memoriam section, I hope they use this picture for her when she dies. I hope to say that, yes, this is the shot that is the emblematic shot for her, that kind of captures her persona. And I don't really set out to do that. Like when I'm in the moment shooting things, I'm not thinking in that way. But whenever I see a shot like this, or a shot for me, Scarlet's shot, I think if somebody takes a more emblematic picture of him before he dies, I'll be a little sad, because I really, this is the one that I feel like is really him. So I try to establish a relationship with everybody who I shoot with. And I try to establish a sense of working together, a collaboration, so that they can tell me their story, and I can, in return, listen to them and figure out what it is that I can do to kind of help them convey that. And sometimes it's, a shot like this, we didn't have a story in mind when we shot this, but somewhere in the back of our minds, that something interesting is going on. For me, it's all about the eyes in a headshot. In a headshot, if you can see something, if you can see that somebody's thinking something, if you can read a person's mind in the picture, then it's a good shot. And when the subject is captivating, it's because there's life behind the eyes, because there's a story being told. And I'm sure you've all heard this. I mean, this is pretty basic when it comes to headshot shooting, but it's not enough to be good looking. It's not enough to be stylish or wear the right clothes or whatever. There has to be a genuine moment for an actor that really works. And I think too, this is a good example of a shot, and I didn't know this was going to be on video, so I don't really know if she's going to want to have this video out there with 13,000 people looking at it. This is a person who I consider very photogenic. She hates being photographed, hates it. But she's naturally very warm. I think this is a pretty good indication of her persona. But she's very businessy, very professional, but when she smiles, it's really warm. And when I caught this, it wasn't like at the moment I shot it, I knew. Because I shot 600 pictures of her, and this is the one we picked. But when I get something where I feel like a person who's not really able to tell their story, they don't have the language in terms of their body language or just the ability to interact with the camera to tell their story, I have to kind of bring it out of them. And I have to talk to her, and it took me forever to get her to give me a genuine smile, to get to the point where she felt she could kind of loosen up, and it was gone instantly. I'm glad I got this thing in focus because it wasn't coming back. So of the 600 shots we took, there was kind of one winner. And that's what happens. This guy, on the other hand, was a goofball the entire time, and same shoot, same company, and neither one of these actors, they're both computer people. They both work for a company that does software development. And so, to try to get something natural out of both of them, as opposed to an actor who's really, an actor is ready to give it to you. An actor really wants to work with you and wants to be directed. These folks just want to get it over with. They want to get in and get out, get the picture taken and say, okay, thank God that's done. I don't have to be photographed again for 10 more years until I lose all my hair. That's their attitude. And here's one of my physician headshots. I mean, obviously she's very photogenic, but again, not a person who felt really comfortable on camera. So it took a little while, a little posing, but as opposed to 600 shots that I had with those other two, I had 3 minutes with her and I had to get it done in 40 or 50 shots. And, you know, doesn't always work. I can't always do it. Sometimes I only get 40, 50 shots because when I have to shoot 20 people in an hour, obviously I don't have enough time to really work and learn the story of every single person. That's where, again, me kind of helping to draw it out. Being a fairly talkative guy, I do tend to get people stopping thinking about themselves and listening to me. And a picture of a person listening is always more interesting than a picture of a person just not talking. So if I can say something interesting that'll evoke a response in them, I can get something genuine, as opposed to the fakey fake smile that naturally people who aren't comfortable on camera really want to give. The defense mechanism smile falls down and gives way to something real. And that's the moment when again, I hope I get the picture in focus. So I'll show you a few more of the acting headshots that I've done. They can be really, actors' headshots can be really any number of styles, as long as they do something to convey the personality. As you can tell, I really like shooting outside of a studio environment. I really like shooting in hallways, in doorways, in window light, in outdoors. I love the little alleyway space between houses. The houses that are really close together in Chicago, you put somebody in the middle of that and have them look out at the sky, and you've got this beautifully focused light right on their face, and you don't have all the top light that you get when you come out and actually have them walk around. So what you get, I go back to this one. This is one where the light is very horizontal, very much in line with the camera, and not too much top light, because the top light is where you get all the unflattering shadows and all the side light. And basically, what you want is your light to line up and effectively create like a ring light or a flash without actually using a ring light or a flash, just by where you position yourself relative to the light. So that's always my fun challenge, to sort of, again, so in addition to trying to find their story, I also have to find whatever is flattering, the light that flatters their face too. I won't get too much off on a tangent about this. I am the kind of guy who, if you ask me the time, I'll tell you how to build a watch. So if I get, if you ask questions to me and I start to depart, I'm going to try to kind of bring it back, because I know, like, I don't want you guys to be here all night. Let's see, here's a good example of a shot where this guy was pretty comfortable on camera, but he was basically giving me the same thing the entire time, and I was doing the very horizontal lighting with him, and the light was very, it was flattering. It would have been really flattering to a young woman's face. And his face is really full of character, and I realized when I put a little bit of shadow, when I shot him in the window on this side and just a reflector, a dimmer reflector on the other side, so that we had, so we have, a high key on this side and then kind of a mid key on this side. It ends up really intentionally kind of bringing out some of the lines and the stubble and the character in his face, which, if I do that with a 53-year-old woman, she's running. She's never going to want to see that picture again. If I do that with this guy, it's like, okay, this is sort of rugged, thing that he's got going on. Do you have a question? No, never mind. So what I try to do is pay attention to the person in front of me, and when I have a really engaging personality, when I have somebody who really likes to play, who really wants to play on camera, then I go ahead and just kind of roll with it and let her move. And this shot, everybody was telling her she shouldn't use this shot because she had been jumping and she had just landed and her hair hadn't quite landed with her in this picture. And so we both love this shot because this is so totally her. She's a stand-up comic and a performance artist. And this shot was absolutely, it worked for her. So you don't necessarily have to go. I think a lot of people think that headshots are, sort of by definition this, and that everything has to be perfectly composed and perfectly, even and all, This is a timeless look, but it's not the best suited to every possible subject. So it's my job, ideally, to find the look that suits the subject. And in this case, that was one for her. Same thing, using the environment in some way to shape things. I really loved Nima. I really loved the environmental portraits that you have. I mean, the way you can frame a subject. I love frames within frames, and that just it just sort of sings to me. What's that? Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. You can. You want to wear the mic to say that so everybody can hear the compliment? Is that okay? And this guy's another stand-up comic. I definitely like. Even though I was an actor, I sort of feel like my people are comics and improv people. That like is the world that I'm really like comfortable with the people. And so as much as I can, I try to craft a shot. This is one where he had a shot in mind. This was at the YMCA in Evanston, and he got in big trouble actually for getting in the pool with his shoes on. But he wanted to do a shot where he was like falling backwards off a diving board, and we just tried it over and over and over again and couldn't get it. And he kept coming out of the pool wet, and kept having to like put on dry clothes again and do that. And finally, like he was down to the suit that we're like, he's just like he's soaking wet. There's nothing we can do to make it look like you haven't already been in the pool. And so why don't we just have you swim around in there for a while and get out and everything. And so that shot and another shot where he's like hanging on the ropes, just kind of kicking back with his legs out, and there's this lap swimmer coming behind him giving him the stink eye because he's in the pool with his shoes on. Those ended up being the shots that he used for his PR materials for his show, for his stand-up night. This woman is one of my favorite actors and just has these magnificent eyes, and she's also a makeup artist, and she also does hair, and she's also just sort of a snazzy dresser, and so, shots like that tend to fit. This guy, a little bit of a shy persona. I put him, put something in the foreground and in the background. And again, a lot of these decisions were completely unconscious on my level until I actually got done and said, oh yeah, hey, that was a great decision retrospectively, that was great. This another stand-up comic. This is a good example, though, of how you don't, with a headshot session, I try to guarantee something new with every shoot. This shot is what I would consider a very traditional performer's headshot. And headshot, by the way, does not just have to be the head. I mean, when you're shooting with an actor, performer of any kind, you can get the whole body in, the waist up, whatever's interesting, as long as they're looking at the camera, it's a headshot. But this picture, same guy. We took this at the Adler Planetarium, and this is a shot he did as a promo for his sci-fi comedy night. And so they're both headshots. This is the one that he tends to use that gets, like when he's touring and stuff, that gets put up at the club and everything like that. And this is the one he uses on the poster. So if you have a headshot session, a really good way to entice people, as opposed to just saying, hey, come in and we'll take a few pictures for 15 minutes and I'll send you on your way, is say, we're going to do changes of wardrobe, we're going to do different locations, we're going to do, because those of you who have digital cameras know what I'm talking about. If you shoot 36 shots and send people on their way, they haven't really fully overcome that initial tension getting in front of the camera. If you shoot 1,000 pictures, by the time you kick them out, they're like, okay, whew, all right, we did all that, but then you edit it down to whatever, 100, 150 pictures when you show them, and they see only those 150, and they think you're a genius, because you didn't take a bad picture all day, and you've got 150 knockout pictures for them to choose from. Yeah, question? How long do your headshots last? A couple hours. It depends on, like this one was more complicated, because we were actually on location at the planetarium. So we did some shots outside after the fact too. So this one went more like 3 hours. A little preparation goes a long way though too, because this was one where we knew we were only gonna have a couple hours in there because it was before they opened. So we had to kind of get an idea of the types of locations we were going to get to. So you can do 3 or 4 or 5 looks during a shoot if you have had a consultation with them beforehand and kind of know what they want. So you stoke the fire of creativity in the meeting, and then 2 weeks later you've got a pretty good arsenal of ideas to work with. And then if you try something and it doesn't work, you can move on to your next idea. But that's why whenever I do a headshot of somebody, I usually like to meet them reasonably well in advance of the shoot, again, to get a sense of their personality, but also so we can just sort of brainstorm together and get ideas that we can potentially use during the course of the shoot. And just the enthusiasm just snowballs when you get an idea, and it's like, whoa, oh my God, yes, that would be awesome. So that said, kind of taking into what Nima was saying, you had a really good point about wanting to work with businesses rather than with individuals. Because individuals can be flakes, and you can have to chase people down for money, and you have to work on their schedule. They almost always have scheduling conflicts that don't accommodate my scheduling conflicts. It's harder. I have to spend a lot more money just setting up the logistics of the job whenever I do an individual shoot. And that's money that I'm not getting paid, because I get paid comparatively little. compared to the actual amount of time that I put in. So, there's the initial contact with them by email or phone, meeting with them for the consultation, figuring out locations, figuring out wardrobe, going back and forth with them a little bit. I have like a wardrobe handout that I send them, just recommendations for wardrobe in general. Then the more specific we get, the more planning it takes. Then the shoot itself takes a couple hours, and then I've got a couple of hours of editing after the fact too. And all of that, I'm only getting paid a few $100 for all of this. So I like working with individuals because I like that process. I like going through the process with them and learning about them and meeting them and figuring out what's interesting about them unique as an individual. And when you work with an editorial, like a photo editing staff, you're working with story in the same way that you read the story and you're kind of figuring out how my photo can complement the story, but you don't have quite as much freedom to go out and shoot the shot that really you think sings for this particular person. And I don't always do that much work for every person I shoot with. There's a lot of times when I'll do, a lot of legwork, and then sometimes people just want to come in, get out, and I'll do that, and I charge them the same amount of money, and I'm like, woo, yes, that was an easy one. But the hard work for me, honestly, the hard work is what's fun. That said, ask my wife how she feels about the fact that we don't have a bigger house or a house with a yard, and why we are sort of on the edge financially, in a lot of situations where if I was getting paid by a business, a commercial company or a magazine editorial, somebody who has a budget, if I get paid by those people more often, I get to get the house with a yard. And I hopefully I'd like to think that I could still do the kind of, sort of fun one-on-one work, but I know in general I'm going to be more sort of having to satisfy someone else's vision as opposed to really working to collaborate with this individual who I want to make their vision happen. We're together, the vision that we come up with together. So it's a trade-off. So, I do headshots for DuPage Medical Group, and it's, in terms of pay per hour of work, it's just astronomically more. And the work, although it's boring, they're nice people, and they bring me in every month. And it's a good steady gig. So my career has been a balance of enthusiastically done low-paying projects and steady gig that can help me pay the bills a little bit better. So in other words, don't quit your day job. And in my case, my day job is medical group headshots, and my avocation is the work that I get paid less for, but get to really, really kind of exercise my creative muscles on. Again, people with exciting personalities, if you got a spaz, let them be a spaz on camera. Go ahead. If you find a spot, go for it. I'm sorry. I know everybody in this room has probably taken a picture on this bridge, right? The Kinzie Street Bridge. If you haven't, go, because it's a fun, great geometry, great background. Go on a sunny day. On this day, it was about as cold as it is tonight, and so we were not out there that long. But again, to me, much more of a sense of story. But this picture, kind of could be an editorial shot. It's not that I necessarily want to create just a headshot. It's whatever the story is interesting. A dancer who's an aspiring model, see this location around the corner because they just built this, or a couple years ago, built this building around the corner from my studio. I'm like, hey, I like that black tile. Someday I'm going to be able to use that. She shows up in this black dress. She's like, yeah, it's like, everybody tells me they want me to do a nice smiley shot, but I really like the dark stuff. And I'm like, yeah, that's where we're going. We're going to make you this, sort of creature of the night. Another stand-up comic. We shot this in the Henry Darger room at the Intuit Center for Outsider Art. This is a good lesson, I think, in what happens when you just ask if you can do something. We thought, because this collection, they're really proud of this collection, and it's like normally people can't go in and walk around among Henry Darger's personal artifacts that they have in there, because everything in there is completely irreplaceable. And I said, hey, we've got this stand-up comic who's kind of an eccentric character, and he'd like to do a shoot in there. And they were like, sure. And I was like, well, do we need to pay you anything? No, this would be great. Just send us the pictures when you get done. So if you think there's a shot you want to do, like usually, yeah, if the musician who you like, yeah, who you called up and like, hey, can I take your picture? Sure, why not? If you have a decent body of work, it helps because you can say, hey, this is the kind of thing that I do. But it's just, I mean, if you go in and you try to do something fun, unless it's really dangerous, people won't usually try to stop you. One of my most fun shoots, and I have a whole series of, I didn't bring any of them for this, but I have a whole series of women in wedding dresses out of the context of the weddings. It's on my website, it's called The Unbrides, and there's about 35 of them, and they're all, basically, this whole world, everyone's a bride, and they're all doing really mundane, non-wedding type things. And I'm not a big fan of like wedding glamour photography, but I love wedding dresses. I actually think they're pretty cool. So we did a shoot in a steel foundry with a woman wearing a wedding dress, and the guys who worked, never hurts to have a pretty girl with you when you want to get people to break the rules. So we show up and ask, and this is even before, we didn't even show up in the dress. We just I called them and said, hey, do you think, is there any chance we might be able to get in and in your steel foundry, like when you guys are actually melting the steel and take a picture in there and with a woman in a wedding dress, do you think that could happen? And the guy on the phone was like, we got a lot of, OSHA regulations we got to worry about. I don't know. I was like, well, I'll bring in my book and we can sit down and talk and I can meet you. And I brought her with me. Heidi came with me for that. And instantly the tone changed. And it was like, oh yeah, oh no, that would be great. Okay, here's what you gotta do. You can't wear a polyester wedding dress because the sparks coming off the steel will melt it. You gotta go get a silk dress. So we did, we bought a $30 raw silk wedding dress. If you ever need cheap wedding dresses, eBay, good place to go. Don't worry about it if they're damaged. You can always hide that on camera. But so then we show back up. They put her in the gloves and goggles and everything, and they gave her the rod and let her take the slag off of steel. OSHA doesn't know about it. I'm not going to say the name of the company, but that's the thing. It's like if you can give the person who's helping you out, doing you the favor, if you give them something interesting to them, they'll usually be willing to help you out. It doesn't always involve money. Most of my like shoots that I've done for actors, comics, they've almost all been for free on location, sometimes with permission and some without. But do what you got to do. Again, stage combat guy. I like taking strobe lights out of doors on sunny days. I think that's a really fun way, strobist kind of technique. And another magician, this guy's name is Dennis Watkins, and he does a show at the Palmer House, and one of his kind of signature tricks is he'll swallow razor blades on a string and bring them back up and pull them out, and he really does it. And I was like in close and watching him do it, and but we set this shot up, and I just liked the ceiling in the room, and I felt it was so more interesting picture to shoot from down below, and have a light right behind his head to kind of emphasize his curly hair, but get all the texture of the ceiling in there. So just play with angles, play with don't ever be satisfied with the obvious shot. Again, another magician. This is Benjamin Barnes, and this is at a place in Oak Park called Under the Ginkgo Tree, which is a historic house in Oak Park. That's 2 blocks from my house, and I'd known the woman there because I had photographed her daughter's wedding, and I really liked her house, and said, hey, can we come and take pictures of this magician? And she was like, oh yeah, she made us cookies. She gave us the royal treatment, in this place. It's a B&B too, so it's actually a house and a business, but just treat people well, give them something that'll make them interested, and they'll usually help you out. And this is probably the most overboard I've gone. This is a composite of 8 different pictures that we took in Gabby's barbershop, and they're all the same guy. I don't know, it's kind of hard to tell because it's a little blown out in the exposure on here, but this guy is an improv and stand-up comic and actor, and he wanted a headshot that was completely unlike any headshot anybody had, like a signature shot. So this shot is, the homepage on his website, I think it still is. But his name's Otis, and he has 8 different personas going on here. And the guy who owned the barbershop, this is one actually where we did have to pay to rent the barbershop or pay him to stay after they closed just to keep the barbershop open. But I really love this old school, old fashioned barbershop. So anyway, that's it for my display of pictures. I know I've just been totally rambling here, but my overall message, story for me is everything, and You know, just kind of collaborate with whoever you're working with and let your imagination go wild and just see what happens. Sometimes it takes something very, very simple and effortless, or at least looking effortless, and sometimes you have to put a lot of effort into whatever you're doing, and the effort shows, like in this shot. But I think that's it. I think that's about all I have to say. Thank you.